Hi folks, how you doing? This is Iqbal with NVIDIA weekly analysis and review. This week is very eventful for the whole market and also for NVIDIA. We'll discuss how NVIDIA may perform this week and what levels we should consider before making buy or sell transactions to minimize our risk. Now, let's get started. Starting with the daily summary, you see that on Friday, Nvidia overall was positive. It closed at 1.97% up, and also after hours is 2.91% up. One of the major reason Nvidia is up after hours is this news that says Nvidia to take Intel's spot on Dow Jones Industrial Average. Moving on to the Nvidia chart, last 5 days, Nvidia is still down about 5.37%, and last 1 month, Nvidia up 13.90%. So last week was not so good for Nvidia, but overall, last 4 weeks, Nvidia still managed to remain positive, and the overall return is about 13.9%. Now let's take a look a weekly candlestick chart for Nvidia and try to compare with the historical data. So on your screen you see the candlestick chart on the weekly snapshot for last 1 year. If you remember last week we went over this data and we noted that last 5 weeks Nvidia had positive closing. And I had the opinion that the next week Nvidia should also close positive. But it did not happen. You see that this week that closed on 22nd, and you see that Nvidia also was able to make an all-time high on that week. But last week you see Nvidia was down about 5%, and that correction was needed probably because before that last 5 consecutive weeks no negative closing, so it was good to have some correction. So this tells me that this week we can expect Nvidia to close positive. But on the other hand, you see so many events this week can add more volatility to the overall market. And I showed you 2016 and 2019 data for after elections, and we saw that after elections, Nvidia maintained the positive momentum. And if Nvidia goes down sometime this week, this should give us a good buy point so we can hold Nvidia until the earnings. We'll go over what are the different levels in a bit. Now let's take a look at forward P for Nvidia. At this point, Nvidia forward P is at 43.39 as of Friday closing, and that's comparatively lower than 1 week prior forward P that was 45.37. So if you remember in my previous videos, multiple times I mentioned that Nvidia should trade between 40 and 50 forward PE until the earnings. So still Nvidia has some room to go further down, but not much. In the worst case, if Nvidia goes down to below 40 forward PE, that would be a good buy point, and that would translate to the stock price of 124.80. So 40 forward P corresponds to 124.80 Nvidia stock price. I'm not sure Nvidia can go down to this level before earnings, but anything can happen. If that happens, then probably it would be a good buy point. Now let's take a look at technical charts for Nvidia. You see a 180-day hourly interval chart for Nvidia on your screen and also Fibonacci levels. I also showed you these Fibonacci levels last week as well, and based on that the 23% retracement was at 134, and I made a comment on my video that around 134 would be a good buy. at least for short term. So Nvidia went down to this level and went slightly below that as well. It touched about 133 or 132 sometime last week. So if somebody had bought Nvidia around 134, and you see that after that Nvidia went down, so he or she would have made some money. And based on this chart, the next level of resistance is at 144.5, and that was all-time high. So if something goes wrong or goes negative for Nvidia or overall market, then the next level of support is 128.04, and that would give also a good buy. And after that is 122.96. So when I say something goes wrong or goes negative, I mean the multiple events this week, right? Including the elections. So what if the elections comes in favor of one party and the other party does not accept that? You know what I mean, right? So in that case, you might see some volatility or uncertainty in the market. Another important event this week is FOMC interest rate decision. So market is expecting the Fed to do the rate cut this time as well. I'm guessing market is expecting another 50 basis point reduction, but let's see what happens during that meeting. So if FOMC meeting does not support the market expectation, then probably market would negatively react to that decision. And after FOMC meeting, we have another important data that's regarding inflation, and that's the CPI index. So CPI or inflation data these days are not as much important as it used to be in the past. I'm talking about first, second, and the third quarter in this year, where market and Fed focus was more on inflation, CPI, and the jobs report. But now things are relatively predictable. But what if the CPI data comes much lower than expectation? Then again, market can react to it. And on the other hand, if you talk about how high Nvidia can go before the elections, then my prior projection or expectation is still in place, and that was 151.73. So we still have probably 19 or 20 days to go before the earnings. So still, I think that 151 is achievable, but this is market, anything can happen. But I will keep this as my projected maximum level for this quarter before earnings. And regarding my transactions, I bought some Nvidia stocks on Friday around 136.5. Let me show you my transaction. You see that I bought some Nvidia stock on Friday around 136.49. And before that, I sold my Nvidia stock around 138.7 on 1030. So that was a good selling point for me. But I still have more cash to buy more Nvidia stocks if Nvidia goes down further. My next buying level is 134, as I showed you before. But if the downward slope for Nvidia is much more steeper, then probably I will not buy around 134. I'll wait further to see if Nvidia goes down to 130, then probably I'll buy around 130 if the slope of Nvidia going down is much more steeper than the past. So regarding my selling, probably I'm not gonna sell Nvidia. I'll wait for some time to see how Nvidia is behaving after the elections. So these are just hypothetical scenarios. It does not mean that Nvidia would behave in such a way, but we need to be cautious and proactive in our transactions so we can minimize our risk and maximize our returns. Now, let's take a quick look on news and some other analysis regarding Nvidia on Friday. So, the very important news is this one that I already shared with you that says Nvidia to replace Intel in Dow Jones Industrial Average. So as we noted on Friday, Nvidia went up. One of the major reasons was the positive earnings beat and the positive sales guidance from Amazon and Intel. And one day prior, you see that we had some depressing number from Microsoft and Meta, and that was a possible reason Nvidia went down the other day. And I warned you guys in my previous video that Nvidia might go down after Meta and Microsoft earnings, and it happened that way. I was not able to make some videos on Thursday and Friday, so apologies from me. So apart from those two news, nothing much I can see on Nvidia on Friday regarding any important news or analysis. So I guess that's all about my weekly analysis and review for Nvidia. I hope you liked the video. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you more in the next video. Take care.